So today I'm going to be talking about the form class and what you can do to make changes to it in a reusable manner, as well as doing a quick stint on how to make form instancing. Have any of you ever used form instancing before?
By that you mean creating new instances of the same form, yeah?
Yeah, having the same form open multiple times within the same
Yeah.
application.
I've done a bit of that in my later applications with SQL Server, so interesting to see how you go about it and compare with what I'm doing.
So what's the point for a form to open multiple instances of the same application?
Okay, well, I'll start by showing this application when it's in use, so to speak. This is one of my main applications for document.
In one of your videos, actually. I don't know whether it was the last video that you recorded or
Yeah, it's been, this is my usual demo application as well, because it's one of the more advanced ones I have. So basically, what I want is for the user to be able to have more than one review open on his screen at a time, because it could be that he has a comment in one review and he wants to copy and paste that comment into another review. So that could be a good reason to allow reviews, multiple reviews, to be open at the same time. And if we click and open one of the reviews, we can see this opens a review form up here. And if I go select a different document and I want to open that review, then I see I now have two forms open up here of two different reviews. You can go on and open a third review.
So basically, when you click on one of the records that you see in that pane, it opens up a form or a copy of the same form. Or I don't know if it is. Is it the same? No, maybe it's not the same form.
Well, yeah, the form is the same, but the data displayed, of course, is different. It's the data is for specific to each review.
Because it seems to me that the name of the form that you can see on the tablet is different.
Yeah, I'm modifying the caption of the form, and the caption is what gets displayed up here. So it's easy for the user to see what review is active when he clicks up here. It's kind of similar to Excel's worksheet names.
Yeah.
And I've even set it up so that if you try to open too many documents at once, you now have 5 open. If I go ahead and try to open a third one or a 6th one, it's going to come up and say here, you have 5 reviews open already. You can't open any more. So it's going to close one of them.
You have a collection in the background keeping the track of how many are open. Is that how it's working?
Exactly. Because each of these forms actually have a lot of record sources. There's the record source for the tree view, record source for review scope. Each of these drop boxes have a record source. Yeah. And if I open up too many, I actually run out of connections.
Okay.
Or allowed open record sets. Now I could probably do things to minimize this, but at the end I just decided, okay, 5 reviews open at a time, that's going to be enough.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's go into development mode and see how all this is accomplished.
When you actually click on those, like those folders that you saw in the other, like here, yeah, you basically open the same form on a different record.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, you pass it the ID of the record you want to open, and I guess it then has each form got an open event that populates certain fields with characteristics of the record you're passing out, take it.
Yep, exactly. Let's go see if I can find it. There, that's the function I wanted to find. So this is my function for opening a review. I hope you can all see my screen okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I have a function for open review, and it has an optional on whether to pass in a review ID. And the reason for this is I use the same function as a go-to function. If I click up here, this actually calls the same function, and since no review ID is supplied, it'll pop up the screen. That's what it's saying here. If we didn't supply a review ID, if it's 0, then it's going to ask in an input box to pop in the review ID so people can type it if they say have the document on paper before them and they want to move to that record. So that's just about finding the review.
Couldn't 0 actually be a review ID? Shouldn't you use null instead of 0?
Well, the review ID is an auto number field, so it starts with 1 and moves from there.
Right.
It could use a variant, I guess, but if it's a long, I can't define it as null. Then I should have defined this as a variant instead.
Yeah, I've got an application that does something not dissimilar to that, Anders. And what I do, when I'm opening an existing record, I pass it the ID of the record I want to open. If I'm opening a new record, I pass it 0, and then the open event of the form says, "Is this ID that I've been passed 0?" Yes, it is. Okay, leave all the controls blank, ready for a new form. Otherwise, go and populate with the record from the database that I've passed it.
Mm-hmm.
That's a similar kind of approach.
Okay, so there's a couple of other things here that we don't need to go into detail with. That's all application related. Now, here, what I want to do is I want to check if the form is already open. So we don't try to open a review form that's already open. We want, similar to trying to open the same document twice. We don't want to do that. We don't want to allow that. So if the form is already open, and I can jump in to see what that checks. The function here says what it tries to do is it takes the review ID and it's checking for the collection. And what it actually does is it checks to see if there's already something in the collection with that key. And if it errors out, that means the form is already open because there's already something in the collection with that key. I don't actually recall why I wrote it like this, and there may be other ways that are makes more sense to do it. I wrote this a long time ago. So basically it's just checking the collection to see if the key already exists.
It still works, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's been working for 5 years. Don't mess with it. Okay, so it's also,
if it's not broke, don't fix it.
Yeah. So if it's already open, then I want to get to that review, and so that the review, the key in the collection is always going to be just be the text review plus the review ID. And this form reviews, that's my collection. We can go and see its definition here. Public form reviews as new collection. So it's a standard access collection.
Yeah.
And by calling the collection with the key, it's actually returning a form object because that's the object contained within the collection. So on this form, I can just use the set focus method. So if the form is already open, move focus to it. And finally, I return the review ID to the calling function. I don't recall offhand why I do that. I probably use it somewhere. Now, this is the part where I'm checking the collection count. If I have more than 5 reviews open now, I'm going to say, okay, we can have maximum 5, and I'm just going to remove the first object in my collection. So the next thing is that this is actually opening the new instance of the form. And when it's form instancing, you can't use the good old do command open form. you have to do it in a different way. So I start by dimensioning a form object, and I set that form object equal to a new instance of my class. The class is called form review, and when it's through, when it's open in this way, you can't use the access name for it. You have to use the Visual Basic environment name for it, which is always prefixed with form. So I add that object to my collection, and I give it the key as before, review plus the review ID. Then I go and I take a SQL string. So that's based on what we've passed into it. I wanted to select all the stuff from my review table, some stuff from my document table, and I pass all this, and I set that as the record source of my form. Then I call a custom form load code in my form. I set it visible. What I then do is I have a recent review list that is applicable for each user, kind of like recent documents in Word or recent worksheets in Excel. And this is about keeping track of that. I add the review ID so that people can see their recent reviews, see how it works up here. The recent review drop-down will show the last 8 reviews this user has had open. So finally, I set focus to the form.
So is your central...
Sorry, come again?
What I was going to say is your actual data that this application is displaying, is that a separate distributed database on a network server somewhere, is it? You've got different users plugging in, so each user's got their own recently reviewed list. Is that how it works?
This used to be a split database, front end and Access backend. It's now a Access front end with a SQL Server backend. I migrated it to SQL Server a couple of months ago.
Okay, right, yeah, that makes
that's been an interesting process, to say the least.
Okay.
It's been a colorful and a learning experience, but it's also been tough. Okay. So here I set the form equal to nothing. Now, if I had not added it to the collection, what would happen is the form would close, because the form is being set. The last variable to the form is being closed. It's being set equal to nothing. And if you don't have any other references, Access will kick in its garbage collection and clean up your objects for you by closing them. But since I've added it to the collection, and the collection is a global variable, it's going to stay in memory.
It gets maintained
inside the collection. Yeah, it gets maintained in there.
Yeah.
Now, if I set the form reviews to nothing, all of those reviews would close. Okay? So that's about adding it. But there's more to it than this. Let's go try to take a look at the form load. Let's see if I can find my... Here it is. This is the form review, and this is my custom form load, where I do such things as setting the caption. Then I do call a procedure, restore expanded from table, and that's related to the tree view. Let's see. Now you can see when I opened this review, none of the nodes were expanded. Now if I close it again, I'm just going to close all of these now. If I go back to the same review, I'll just take this review. So all the nodes are expanded. If I contract them all, close it, open it again, you can see they're still contracted. What I basically do is I store the expanded or contracted state for all these nodes. It's basically people have complicated reviews, they might want to try to remember that what they have expanded and what they don't have expanded.
Yeah.
And
where do you store these settings?
Sure.
It's actually stored in a table, and when the form is loaded, this gets restored from the table into an array that is on the form. Let's see, I think it's this one. And when the form is closed, that same information gets written to the table. So any changes during the application when it's active does not get written to the table. So I don't want to write to the table each time a user expands or contracts a node. But when they close the form or when they open a form, that's when I read or write to the table. Yeah. So
and that would be a local table in the local access front end.
No, it's actually on the shared server. I considered.
Yeah, okay, I thought you might, if every user had their own front end version, it would be kept there.
Yeah, but then it would be wiped each time I released a new front end. If I store it in the front end, then they wouldn't maintain it. And I tried to check the performance of it, and since performance was not a problem, I decided to leave it in the server side. Now, if it was slow, if performance was a problem, I would probably do just that, move it into a local table. So it's a trade-off, of course. So I do some things regarding to whether or not I have a global variable or module level variable that I set to true if it's the first time it's being opened. I think it's related to building the tree view. I don't recall. I don't want to go into that. But basically, I build a tree view that we see over here in the form, and I fake a left click on the first node, and clicking this node is basically calling this form to be displayed, where if I click another node, it's actually a different subform being displayed over here. And I fake clicking the node so that my subform gets displayed properly, so it doesn't show up with a blank form.
Yeah, okay.
I don't know why I do a requery.
Left click node is a special function.
Yes.
Right.
It's related to the tree view, so I'm not going to go into details with that. If you want me to return to that later when I'm done with the presentation, just say so, and I'd be happy to show what it does.
I think you also have a video of a previous meeting in which you explain about tree views.
Yeah, I do tree views a lot.
I don't know if you actually went over this in the video, I don't remember, but I don't know if you actually used the same file for the tree view demonstration or not.
I don't think I used the same for the tree view demonstration. My tree view demonstration was a lot simpler, more low level, but I did use my same application for my ribbon presentation. Let's see. I want to see when I've closed the form, there's something we have to do. We have to remove the form object from the form collection. Again, this is one of those things that are different from when we're just using our form regularly and opening with do command. We can't just close the form. We have to make sure that we remove it from the collection so it doesn't stay there taking up space. So I remove the reference from the collection and I store the expanded values to the table. So that's actually all there is to form instancing. There's one more thing, which is how do we get a hold of the form that's actually open on screen right now? We want to do something to that form. So I have a function that will return the form if I need to get a hold of that form. What I'll do is return form. I just pass in the ID. So I set a reference to the object in my form reviews collection and return that. See, I think I use it somewhere also here. If I need to refresh the review for some reason, I have a function here that will access that particular form and call its builds review function. Other ways to do it could be, if it's the active form, you could use screen.activeForm. So, is there any more questions on form instancing?
Go on, Giorgio. Fire away.
No, I just was just wondering whether all this code, is it available to us, or can you share? Because obviously retaining all of this at the end of this presentation, it would be nice to take a look at the code, I think.
Okay, well, I'm recording the session, so you can see it there, and maybe I think you can just Google form instancing or multiple forms open, something like that. You can find lots.
That you're dealing with this evening, so I think that the possibility of taking a look at your code directly into a file would be probably the best. Yeah, one can also Google it, but yeah, but I understand that. I suppose that in any case, all the information that you have is on SQL Server, so you don't actually share the information that's in the tables or anything. It would be just the, especially concerning the classes, how they're built and all that stuff. So I think it would be helpful to be able to look at the code in addition to look the various components up on Google, or yeah, it's got a lot of stuff.
Yeah, but I'm not allowed to share all of this.
Okay.
There's too much stuff here.
It's like
That's a common application, isn't it? So,
I could put together a demo, but to be honest, I don't think I would find the time for it.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's go ahead and check out this.
Giorgio?
Yeah? Yes?
Yeah, there's a good book that I used that actually demonstrated a number of the techniques that Anders is showing here. It's quite an old book, but I use it quite a bit. It's still very, very good. It's have you got a pen and paper?
Actually,
it's called, that's the one, yeah, Ken Getz.
I have it.
They cover form instancing in there in a very similar way.
Yeah,
it's a good book. It's in there actually. That's where I got some of my stuff.
But the problem is that Access, usually you can basically circumvent using classes, using the inbuilt classes, which like Anders rightly said, that like forms and reports and all of these are actually classes, although they're kind of, they're not custom, they're just Access built classes. So you can actually basically do most everything without actually having to write custom classes. So you can, you can read the Access Developer's Handbook about classes and trying to learn it, but at the end of the day, it's difficult to find situations in which you can actually use them, because you can actually find other ways to deal with whatever problems just by using the Access inbuilt classes rather than building them your own. So.
Yeah, no, I think you're right, absolutely. But as I say, the only thing I wanted to say was that in that book, I know I've seen instances where they use the new form instancing technique that Anders is showing, and they just kind of added a little extra module that kept the collection in a separate code module to keep a track of the various forms that you open, and then add and remove them from the class as you go.
Okay, so now I'm going to be showing more about how we can, I think it's, I don't know if it's the correct word, subclass the form. I'm going to overlay our own form class onto the access form, where we're going to modify some of the properties, some of the events to make it reusable, first of all, so we can just pop this code into any form we have. But also we want some special effects, and we don't want to code those special effects for each control or each form. And if we take a look, the first special effect we have here is that as I move the cursor around, note how the text box that gets the focus gets a blue outline, and the attached label gets changed to bold and italic.
Okay.
And of course, if we want this, we don't want to code this for each and every text box, because it would be immense pain to write it and even more to maintain it.
Yeah.
Another thing, I'll get back to that. Let's start by looking at how we actually do this part of it. So, as the form is opened, let's go form open. Nope, wasn't there. Let's look in the load event instead. Here. So I have a module level variable up here. So we need this line at the declaration, where I have the smiley coder standard form class. And what I do is when the form loads, I start up a new standard form, and I pass in me being the form I just opened. And the rest is not related to this. So let's go have a look at what the helper class initial function does. So this is my, you see down here, smiley coder standard form. This is my class module. And here we initialize it. We have passed in an access form. And I start by creating a new collection of controls. So within my form, I actually maintain a separate collection of controls, just like the form contains its collection of controls. And I'm not removing anything from the form. I'm just adding on to it. And I start by saying if the default view of the form is a single view form, then we do something. If it's a continuous form, then we do something else. This is the continuous form. So let's start by looking at the single view form. So first off, I set a reference to the form I passed in. This is again, module level reference. So I need to, within my standard form class, I need to maintain a reference to the form. And now for each control in the form, I do something. Actually, I don't do it for all controls. I only do it for these kind of controls, a text box, a combo box, and a checkbox. I do this because each control behaves differently. I noticed that the checkbox's update event is kind of different than the combo box's update event, at least when you're clicking on it. So if it's a text box, what I do is I have, again, another control, another class called the smiley coder text box. So I create a control, and I create a new smiley coder text box, and I pass it in the control that originally came from the form. Let's go see here. Now this bit is very important. I'm subscribing to the events of the control of the text box. And that is also why if you do with events, you must specify the, you cannot just say access.control. It has to, I have to subscribe to the events of just a text box. So I have one class for text box, one class for combo box, and one class for checkbox. So as this is initialized, So the source control, that is the control handle that was passed in from the form through our standard form class. And I make sure I keep a reference to that original control. And I make sure that I have an event handler for the following events. It's a rather simple function. It just says if the object, if I pass in the event and I pass in the object, so if it's a control and the event is before update, what I'll do is I'll check the controls properties of the before update, and if it's blank, I make sure it says event procedure. Does that make sense?
Say that again.
That's why I asked. I had a feeling this might have gone a bit too fast.
Yeah, I glazed over there for a moment.
Yeah. Well, use event procedure for constants. I never seen it used like that.
Well, if I want to subscribe to the event has to it has to be plugged in, so to speak. And if you have an event which has if you go look at the form under the Events tab, and if that's empty for the before update, then Access doesn't know that anything wants to subscribe to that event. So it won't, when the before update event occurs, it won't look for any object subscribing to the event. So I have to go and make sure that the property under the event before update is actually filled out. And it has to be an event procedure. It can't be a macro.
Yeah, no, I've never actually seen it because I think I saw it
Actually,
associated with a constant. I've never actually seen it used like that.
Well, I to be honest, I could just have written like this.
I just gave it a short name. Yeah.
So I'm going to go back and see. So I make sure that my text box has the following events: an on dirty, on got focused, on lost focus, and on undo. So that's the 4 events I want to subscribe to. So then I look at the control. Did you know a control actually has a collection of controls of its own? How many of you knew that a text box has a controls collection?
I knew that the forms have a inside, basically the inside every form there is a controls collection, which is the collection of controls inside the form. But I didn't know that every control actually has a, because I mean, how can you have controls inside a control?
You don't actually have controls inside a control, but you have references to a control. So if the control has a collection of controls and its count is non-zero, then that is because it has a label attached. So when a control has a label attached, it's the reference to that label is inside the controls collection. So what I'm doing here is saying if the count is different from 0, then the label attached must be the first object in the controls collection.
The label is always control 0.
Yeah, or to the best of my knowledge, I haven't seen it not be the control 0. So this has worked for me. I don't think it's actually documented anywhere. Yeah, exactly. So one more thing is I store the original back color, the original border color, and the original border width, so that when I move away from a control, it will return to the original color. Okay, so now I have my events, and if we go look at the form inspections, and let's see, we want to look at You see that there's actually not a lot of code in this form. And if we look at any of the text boxes, such as, let's see, this one, memo observation, that's actually the active control right now. There is nothing in the before update. There's no dirty, there's no undo. All of these are actually empty. But the best part is they don't have to be empty. I could write the dirty down here. Let's see what happens. If I make it. So it still gets printed. So now I actually have a dirty event both inside my form control, but I also have the dirty event as I subscribe to it down in my text box. So, see, I remember I added the on dirty here. Okay, so if we'll go look, as we are adding something to the with events. So if I go up here, I can see my control, and I can see the events over here, and note that I have a dirty event, and it's right here. You can see it has the name, control dirty. And it's a really simple function. It's just saying if the back color of the form is different from this constant I defined as being the dirty back color, then I want to color it. It could be that it was already dirty.
Yeah.
So just saying if it's not doesn't look dirty, then make sure it gets colored dirty. I'm just gonna restart this because as I was making code to the or making changes to the active form, I think something got reset.
But see, Anders.
Yes.
Yeah, but this is the thing, for example, that I don't understand about classes. Like this dirty event that is associated with the control object, right?
Mm-hmm.
The control object is something that you've defined inside that custom-made class, which was called TS something. I don't remember now.
Yeah, text box. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's right. At the bottom of the exactly. So, but this particular class has been completely created by you, right?
Yes.
So what I don't understand is this, because dirty event is something which is like already like inbuilt into Access. When you're talking about access control and stuff like that, they have a dirty event. But in the case of a custom-made class, these dirty events, are they, I mean, you have to build them yourself, or do you reuse the dirty event, which is part of the Access arsenal, so to speak?
Okay, well, in this case, what I'm doing is I'm declaring that inside my class, I have another class, which is the control. And I'm saying that's an access text box.
Okay, and inside the control class, the control, access text. Oh, okay, right. So basically, this is actually defined as a built-in access text box with all its properties and methods and stuff like that, one of which is actually dirty, the event.
Yeah.
Okay, right, yeah. So it's actually not really a custom-made class, but you're actually using an access class, which is the text box class. But
yeah,
I don't understand the connection between you using this access built-in class with the TSC underscore text box class. What's the connection between the two? Is there no connection? What's that?
Well, there is definitely a connection. You can think of this as me expanding or customizing the text box. I have a wrapper class, if you will, that contains the access control, the access text box control. I'm just doing some things to customize it.
TRS_textbox class, this wrapper class, is the TRS_textbox class, or are you talking about another class? What's this class which wraps around this access textbox?
Well, this TSC_textbox, my class.
Okay.
Within that, I have a reference to another class, and I want to do some things with it.
Okay.
I'm not really sure how to explain it.
Your class listens through events that are triggered by the other class.
Yep, that's true.
I think that might be that's how I understand it. Yeah, it's like listening for something coming in over the radio. So the access text box has an event, and as soon as something happens on one of those events, like dirty or got focus, this class that you're in now, the TSC text box code, is listening for that event and can respond and take your own action based on what you want to do if you hear that event, correct?
That is the gist of it, yeah, exactly. I'm listening in, I want to do this, and the reason I do it through a class is that I only want to write this code once. I don't want to have to write this code for each text box in my application. So I have to make it in a class so that I can make it reusable. And this might not be, there's plenty of different ways to use classes, and this might not be the standard way, but this is the way to accomplish what I want to accomplish. You can use classes in ways that are quite different from what I'm doing here. So let's go take a look at some of the other functions. When it gets focus, what it does is it checks whether we have a attached label, and if we do, we set the font to be the font to use italic and to use bold. Then we change the border color and the border width of our control.
Yeah. The thing is, you can use this class and you can listen to events from a multitude of controls all at the same time, can't you? Which is excellent.
Yeah, because each of these, the Smiley TSC standard form has its own collection of references to the same control. And you see, I mean, these are two different text boxes, but I only have the code written one time. I don't want to have code that I have to copy paste for all of my text boxes. See, when it turns dirty,
if you add another text box later on, you just add it into the collection and it behaves the same.
Yeah, if I go back to my design view and add another text box, I don't even have to think about adding it to my class. It gets added through the code automatically by itself. I don't have to do anything.
Yeah, nice.
So you can see that's the dirty color. If I write something, it gets turned dirty. Now if I press escape, notice how the dirty color disappeared from this field. That's because I have the undo listening in as well. It just has a function remove dirty coloring right here. It sets the back color of the control back to the original back color. I probably cannot do it up here. Yeah. Yep, I could actually. So these are all rather simple functions. This is just about calling, setting the colors of the form, stuff like that. Let's take a look at a bit more advanced example. Now see, this drop-down contains a list of different entries. These are systems used in railway trafficking. Now, what I wanted to do was if the user double-clicked the field, it should automatically just jump to the next item in line. So I'm double-clicking and just jumping to the next item in line. And at the end, it'll switch to nothing and then switch to the first item in line. See if let's just to make sure you see it's actually working, I'm choosing power supply and double click, and it switched to the next one, platform screen door system. Again, I don't want to write this code for all of my combo boxes. I want to write it once and then forget about it. So let's go look at the ComboBox class and see how that's different. So in the ComboBox class, again, I have after update, got focus, lost focus, undo. These you all saw in the for the text box. Now notice that I don't have a dirty event for the combo box. Now one of the reasons for this is as you start typing in the combo box, it gets dirty. Now that makes sense. But it doesn't actually change until you select a value. Again, that makes sense. But if the user started, I noticed when I wrote this, as the user started typing, if I change the back color, that seemed to trigger Access to do a refresh on the control, and that would force the selection of whatever the user had already started to write. So the user would start writing and be forced to select the first entry that matched whatever he was writing. So I had to actually wait, in this case, until the after update. I couldn't use the dirty, it was messing it up. So that's another reason why I have to have different classes for the checkbox and the combo box and the text box, because they're slightly different in behavior, just enough to be a pain. Okay, this is the same. Check whether it has a label and store its original colors. Now here, this is the function related to the double click. Whenever the user double clicks, we call this function cycle combo. And that's actually written in a separate module. So what it does is it first checks if there's nothing in the combo, and then set the list index equal to 0. Basically selecting the first item. This might actually fail if your combo box is completely empty, if there are no valid values. I haven't checked that, but I just realized it might. Anyways, so what it'll do here is
The last item.
I don't actually know what this is doing. Yeah, I think it's checking if it's the last item. Oh yeah, right. If the list index is equal to the last item, which is the list count minus 1, that's the last item, then
Index is 0 basically.
Yeah, then we want to move to the first or move to null. So if field is a required field, we move to the first. Otherwise, we move to null. So we check the parent record set of the combo box's control source. And if that is required, then we set to the first item. Otherwise, we set to null.
Yeah.
That's pretty sweet. Otherwise, we just move to the next item in the list. So jumping back to our combo box code, let's see. Right, I added something to the mouse up event. Now if I right click, I can do a reset, which apparently I think I never, maybe I never finished writing this part. Supposed to reset, supposed to do an undo on the control, set it back to the old value. I guess I never finished doing that. I'll have to look back into that. But you see how you can actually code a command bar for just the right-click event of your control box or your combo box. I just haven't finished the code for the reset.
Yeah. Okay.
It does call for an undo on the access control. I don't know why it doesn't work. I think now we'll reset it to the original value when we first started. You can see the system is now a TRS Train transmission system. If I change it to something, right-click for an undo, it gets returned to the original value. So what I did was I just, instead of using the undo, I said screen.activecontrol.value equals to the old value. Now, if this was production, I might want to make sure that the old value wasn't null or something like that. But just to show it can be done. Let's see if we move on a bit. Back to the standard form. So once we've finished adding our controls to the collection, we actually add some event handlers to the form as well. So I want something to happen to all of these after update, dirty, undo, unload, close, before update, and on error. And I actually also want something special to happen if it's a subform. Let's try to look at the events we have here. When the form has been updated, so if it's a single view form and it's after update, I call this function clear dirty formatting. And what it does is it loops through its own collection of controls and calls each control's remove dirty coloring. Basically, this means that after the user is done editing and hits the save button, I want all that dirty color to disappear. And I do that through the use of the form, calling each of the controls. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay. Let's see what other functions we had. We have before update as well. Now, all of my forms will always have almost always anyway, contain a combo box called created by and a text box that records the date created, as well as a combo box for change by and a text box for date changed. You don't see them here, they're invisible. I don't actually need to display them to the user, but I record this, and since all of my forms use this, I added it in here. And at some point I probably had a form that didn't use it. That's when I added the on error resume next. So there's another thing, when the form closes, again, I'm just subscribing to the form close event. And what I want to do is I want to clear my own collection of controls so that it doesn't retain in memory, otherwise you might get some funky errors. And as the last bit, I clear the reference to the form itself, and if it had a parent control, I just clear that reference as well. Let's see. I don't think I want to go into more detail with any of this, but I hope you get the point of what can be done. Reusing it like this.
Yeah, I like the look of that. control. Yeah.
One of the things I never got working quite properly is when you move from when you move from the parent form to the subform. The parent form stops coloring the active text box. But when you move from the subform to the parent form, subform's thing stays visible. I actually do something similar for the continuous form. As you can see when I'm moving around. And the difference is that I can't use the back color in the same way. So if we go, you see, I checked the default view of the form, and if it was the single view form, I did some things. If it's a continuous form, I do it in another way. And I add, see, I don't do I don't do something for each of the controls in the same way. I can't. There's some limits to what I can do in a continuous form. But I do add event handlers to the onPaint, and I think this was only added in later versions of Access. And I add something to the onCurrent. One of the things I wanted to do was to highlight the line that the user's on, more than just this small icon out on the left, because I don't think that's sufficient to let the user know where he is. So if we look at the continuous view forms events, here, detailed section paint. It will get the active control, and as the form is painting, no, sorry, I don't remember this code well enough to go into details with it. I'll just leave that for now for another session. If you want to look more into multiple event handlers, I can definitely recommend this blog post by Ben Clothier. That's the post that got me started on it. Now he wants to reuse the event handler to do something related to key navigation. He has a date control, and he wants to do specific things. So imagine if you're in this date control here, and you wanted to do like switch up one date if you press the up key, or switch the date down one day by pressing the down key. And he adds this code through his he writes about it here. He also writes about before update. Let's say you want always for your forms to show a message box saying, do you want to save the changes? And you could put that code into something like this as well, and you don't have to make it as complicated as I did. You don't have to make something for each of the checkbox, ComboBox, text box. You could just stick with the form and say, okay, for all of my forms, I want them to pop up a message box when the record is saved saying, do you want to save this form?
Yeah.
I think that's a balance, because when it comes to what I often use the before update to check if the record is valid. I might have some checks saying, okay, if this combo box is true, then there must also be a value over here. So I might want to leave something like that to the specific form and not an overall class for handling it. I can recommend giving this a read as well, and I'll try to post that link in my on the Access Europe page. So, do any of you have any questions related to this?
Yeah. No, I think that's good. I'll have a look. Have you recorded this session, Anders?
I have. I think so. It says it's recording.
Okay, yeah, I should go over that again slowly and have a play. But yeah, I like the look of that. Controlling all the controls on a form with just a single custom class to listen for the events. Save a lot of coding, I think.
So if any of you have any other,
thank you, sir.
If you have any other questions not related to the presentation, but anything you're just thinking, okay, hey, we can talk about this for 5 minutes, then go ahead and shoot.
I actually do, but first, if you don't mind, I would like to still ask you something about the topic of this presentation.
You go for it.
You can see that this is basically still what nowadays is called the Access client. There's no web involvement or anything, because you know that now Microsoft has produced the Access web apps.
Yes, I do.
And yeah, you can see that with the Access client proper, you can actually do a lot of acrobatics because it is very flexible. But do you think that when it comes to actually developing something using the Access web app, so all this basically all the features and the flexibility that all these classes allow you to do, because basically Access web apps don't use VBA. So how would you be able to reach this level of flexibility, do you think? Because
okay.
I know that you can also use what they call managed code, I've heard, which seems to be like a bridge between the website of Access and still being able to kind of use maybe VBA or maybe even C or C# or stuff like that. I'm not sure, because nowadays when I look at Access web apps, it seems like everything is basically governed by macros almost. And so I don't know. Do you think you can actually reach this level of flexibility using Access web apps compared to the client side?
Okay. I think that's a really great question, by the way. No, is the short answer.
That's encouraging.
When you think about it, an Access web app is supposed to be consumed by
millions of people.
Well, yeah, at the end, but you have browsers, a lot of different browsers in different versions. You have mobile browsers, you have tablet browsers, you have computer browsers. So
you have to streamline everything so that it fits basically every browser.
To start with, you have to make it a lot simpler.
Okay.
I mean, if you look at some of the more advanced websites, one of the problems you might see sometimes is that it doesn't work on your browser. I mean, personally, I have a couple of browsers. I have both Internet Explorer and Chrome. And what I do sometimes, if I'm on a web page and it just doesn't look right or doesn't seem to react as I would expect, I'll try it out in another browser. And usually that solves the problem. So that's one reason to keep it simple. Another reason is I think they wanted to focus more on data and less on fancy stuff.
Right.
I also think they wanted to streamline the Access applications so they look more similar to each other. There's less of a learning curve. One of the things I'm hesitant about with customizing the class too much is that people expect applications to perform in a certain way. And you might think that you have reinvented the whole application layer and made it much smarter, but if it's not what people expect, then they might actually use more time getting to learn your interface. I mean, a simple, intuitive interface that behaves like all the other interfaces people are used to will be simpler for them to start using. there's also the thing with web apps that they have to be, you can't have Visual Basic Code in them. And presumably that is to prevent any chance of virus infecting the system. You also have to make sure that that code can run on all applications, and I believe that the code is a combination of JavaScript and things that run on the server. Access is a web app server, which is a SharePoint server, but the data is hosted in a SQL server, by the way. So it's a different kind of animal than Access Client, and I don't think it's fair to compare the two. What you can say is that Access Web Apps will deliver a fast way to develop web apps. I mean, if you want the same kind of richness that you see in a desktop client access, you'd have to develop a .NET application. And if you're comparing a .NET application to an Access Web App, I mean, the Access Web App, you can turn out something simple, usable in a couple of hours. It's not going to be fancy. It's not going to be something like what I presented here. But just that thing you did in 5 hours in Access, it's maybe going to take you a couple of days or weeks in a .NET application.
And probably the results are probably not as fancy or like satisfactory as an Access, because in my company we tried a couple of times to actually it's called porting an Access application onto .NET, and it is feasible, but it costs a lot of money, because basically you have to get some people who know .NET, and basically you do it via outsourcing. And the results are not, especially again, as far as flexibility, but also from the graphic point of view. It seems that Access, at least from our standpoint, is still kind of unrivaled as far as this combination of flexibility and also accuracy in the graphics that you get, because you can actually like very fine-tune the graphics also because of all these controls and this flexibility that Visual Basic allows you to have. So, I mean, yeah, you can do it in .NET, but it costs a lot more money. So we found that out.
I would say that most things you do in Access will cost minimum 10 times the amount to do in .NET.
Yeah. And also money-wise, yeah?
Money-wise and time-wise, complexity-wise. Yeah. And another thing is, if you make it in .NET and you want to make a change and you don't have a .NET developer, who's going to make that change?
That's right.
Do you want to call a third party every time you have to make a change to your application? No, you don't.
But that's what we do. For some of our applications, which our IT department has decided to, because we had them basically front and back end all in Access on our servers, but our IT department decided that they wanted to have like jurisdiction over the ownership of the data, so they just stored all the data. Basically all the back end, they changed them into SQL Server, and then they gave they handed over the making of building the forms to this outsourcing company, and it cost a lot of money to do it. The reports, for example, still remain in Access. So it's kind of a hybrid application. You have forms for data inputting and also the backend, which are basically run by this outsourcing company, and the reports still in Access, because it would cost too much to actually do also the reporting. So it's kind of a, I think that also this is also probably the reason why Microsoft tried to go the Access Web Apps way, because they saw that there was this constant clash between IT departments and user or power user or developers who were using Access, because we've seen some kind of a, I wouldn't say as a threat to the IT department, but I think it's close to that because it's kind of a loose horse that runs through the company, and they don't have real control over access, and so they kind of despise it because of that.
That's a quite common conception that IT departments doesn't like access. And you're completely correct. They don't have the same amount of control as when it's on SQL Server.
And that's why Microsoft went the Access Web Apps way, because they said, okay, so we will just automatically give ownership of the data to the IT department, but as far as developing anything that is not back-end will still remain with whomever produces these Access Web Apps. So it's kind of to appease both sides, both the final users of the applications who want to basically have some freedom in doing whatever they want, and the IT departments who want to centralize everything.
I think that is part of the reason, yeah. But one thing I've never understood about IT departments despising access is why don't they despise Excel in the same way?
Absolutely, yeah, that's right.
I've seen so complicated Excel spreadsheets that, and if you ask me, an access application is far easier to understand because it's, even if a novice creates it, it has some degree of structure.
Yeah, the relationships and structural referential integrity, stuff like that, that Excel being a flat file, it doesn't have. So,
and you can start by looking at the code, looking at the queries, looking at macros, but if you have Excel, you can have formulas anywhere.
Yeah, you drive yourself nuts, yes, trying to
find out which formula references what,
exactly,
and what other cells references this formula that I want to change. It's a nightmare.
Absolutely,
why don't they despise Excel in the same way? I think it's basically lack of understanding. I think it could have been a funny.
I think that the basic reason is because in enterprises, in companies, you cannot eradicate Excel because anyone can use it. You just open the spreadsheet and input data into cells. There's no, so even a mere secretary can use Excel. So can you take that away from her? No, you can't. So they have to let Excel exist inside companies because it's just like much more ready to use than Access, because Access you have to have kind of a mental frame in order to be able to do something in Access which is beyond the pure basics, which are best, I guess. And no one just in Access just stays at the basics. What do? You just fill a table and that's it. You don't do much. So, but in Excel you can actually do that. Like if you want to, there are actually people who use Excel, for example, instead of words, because they just, you already have the columns, so you just fill the columns, and that Office 2016 is coming out. It looks like that there's not much difference between the Access 2016 and 2013, as opposed to Access 2013 compared to Access 2010 as far as Access Web Apps, because actually they weren't even called Access Web Apps in 2010. So they actually completely changed the paradigm, but they seem to have stuck with Access 2016. So they seem to have found the right formula, I think.
Yes, in 2010, they decided to base web apps on SharePoint, and then they moved completely away from that. Not completely away. They're still basing it on SharePoint, but in a different way. The data is in SQL Server. So we now have true relational database. You have SQL Server and web apps. When you create views or queries, it becomes a view on the server. So you don't actually have local queries. The queries are on the server. And that's a fantastic thing. Anyways, on the Julian Kirkness is going to be at my conference in Copenhagen. He's going to be presenting on web apps, and he's done some amazing things on web apps. I mean, he's created a lot of things that I thought that the web app architecture was not mature enough for. but he's definitely showed me that you can make some impressive things on web apps. And he's selling his web apps in the Microsoft store. So I'd definitely come just to hear him. If you have any interest in web apps, come to our conference and you can hear what he has to say. Right. He's the guru on web apps as I see it. Okay, just to wrap up, of course, I want to advertise for our conference, June 2nd in Copenhagen. I think the price is down to 20 euros now. It's a one-day seminar, June 2nd. We're going to be talking about the power of Access web apps, office automation, what's the current situation of Access market, technology, image, Microsoft project, policy, so on and so forth. We have great speakers. We have Juan Soto flying in from Chicago. We have me from Denmark. I'm the one right here. We have Julian Kirkness coming in from the UK to talk about web apps. And we have Carl Donnerbauer, I hope I pronounced that right. He's coming from Germany. So 4 Access MVPs to talk about Access. There's going to be networking. There's going to be a couple of beers at the end of the event. It's definitely worth coming. Just for the beers. The presentations are going to be good too, but we have Danish beer, so anyway. Yeah.
Before closing, I just wanted to ask you another thing very briefly about one strange thing that is actually happening to me, because I've just installed the Office 2013, and there is something strange that is happening compared to Access 2010. I don't know whether, I can't find the reason, and I don't know whether you've actually experienced this or not, and it's basically happening only when you actually use Access 2013, when you actually try to export a query using the transfer spreadsheet from, basically you have code in Access, they use the transfer, I suppose you've seen the transfer spreadsheet command, you've probably used it, to basically get the output from a query inside Access, port it to a spreadsheet. The strange thing that is happening to me with Access 2013 is that basically the query is exported correctly into the spreadsheet, and basically the spreadsheet has several sheets. Like you have basically the destination sheet where this transfer spreadsheet transfers the data. But the funny thing is that there are other spreadsheets that are actually with simple formulas connected to the sheet that actually receives the data from the query. And for some strange reason, unless you do recalculation, you don't see the data correctly in these other sheets that actually basically get the data via these simple formulas from the sheet that receives the data from the using the transfer spreadsheet in the same workbook. If I actually do launch the same code with Access 2010, basically the receiving spreadsheet and the spreadsheet, the sheets connected to it, you can actually see the results correctly. Only when you actually carry out this transfer spreadsheet using because basically you look at the destination sheet and all the data is there. I mean, they're fine, but like for example, there is a column of dates, and there is a connecting sheet within the same workbook that links to that. Basically, it's just it should simply get the date and show it in this other sheet. But instead of actually getting the date, like for example, you have the month of March, like 30 cells from 1 to the 30th of March 2015. The sheets in the same workbook, which is actually connected to this column, just shows you 000/01/1900 and all the columns like that. I don't understand. You have to actually press F2 and then press enter to recalculate all the cells in order for the sheet to actually show you the correct results. It's strange because I mean, if I do the same export, the same transfer spreadsheet using Access 2010, this doesn't happen. Do you have any idea why that is?
I haven't seen it myself. The idea I'm thinking about is whether
If
it's
you want, I
related.
can actually send you the access file that does this with the connecting with the associated spreadsheet. So if you want to take a look, just to see that this weirdness that only happens with Access 2013. I don't understand it. It's really, I have to recalculate every single cell for it to actually show what's in the destination sheet that receives the results of the query. It really baffles me. I don't know how to solve it, other than basically not moving to Access 2013 and staying in Access 2010.
Well, the thing is, as far as I know, they didn't make much or any development on the client side of Access.
No, I didn't ask them to make any development. Just stay as you are.
So that's why I'm wondering why you're seeing this in 2013. The only thing I'm thinking about is whether it's related to having sub-data sheets.
A worksheet that receives the content of a query, so that there's no sub-data sheets or anything. You know? So,
if you look at your query in data view, do you have a plus sign to expand it?
No, there's no.
Okay. Well, you can send me the sheet. Otherwise, next time,
Right. Okay.
If you have the thing on your computer,
I mean the sheet. I mean both the database and the worksheet, so that you can see the code that actually runs this transfer data sheet and also the receiving worksheet, so you can see both of them working. Right, because I really I'm not my wit's ends. Other than going back to Access 2010, I don't know how to. Or spending my time recalculating every cell. It's really strange.
You're welcome to send it to me. I'll see if I can find time to look at it.
Thanks.
So one last thing I want to say before we end the meeting is next time is May 6th, and I'm going to have Teresa Henning from US is coming. She's a book author. She's written several books on Access.
I have her book, which is Access 2013 Programming.
Yep, I have it as well.
Good.
It's good. Yeah, I like it. She's going to be presenting about project management of Access projects, and not just from also managing your own Access project. And I think it's going to be great. She's a great presenter, and it's one of those sessions I'm looking forward to take part in as well. So if you know anyone, spread the word. Let them know about our group so that we can get some more people in.
Right.
And I think that's it for today. Thank you very much for showing up.